story. He's one of the most recognizable athletes on the planet. But how much do we really know about what shaped Tiger Woods before the fame, the titles, and the headlines?
A new book titled Project Title, The Birth of Genius and the Price of Greatness takes a deep dive into Tiger's early years. It reveals the intense pressure, discipline, and drive that helped create a once-in-a-generation talent. Joining us now is veteran golf journalist Gavin Newsham, who uncovered Woods' journey. Gavin, thanks so much for joining us, Arc Seattle, this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So how did Tiger Woods' relationship with his dad play a role in his success as an athlete?
As an athlete, it was key, I think. His dad was the guy that drove him on the golf course, whereas his mother, Tida, tended to be the person that drove him off it academically, maybe even spiritually. She was a Buddhist. But his dad, in terms of nailing down what he wanted and expected from his son, was absolutely key, absolutely.
And they had very high standards for him as well. And you write about Woods experiencing fear at a young age. How did that impact his mindset?
I think he was never happier than when he was just playing golf, I think. So once he was out on the golf course, clubs in hand, he was happy. I think off the course, I think he was scared. I think he was scared of his mum. She was a strict disciplinarian. And obviously the levels that his father set for him as well, he was scared of not reaching those as well, to the point where, you know, you could say he didn't really even have a childhood, or not a normal one in any sense of the word. He was quite a lonely boy at school, by all accounts, and I think that came down to having to invest so much time in his golf game, which again was driven by his father.
Tough adolescence and certainly tough growing up too. And we know that he faced racism as he entered the national spotlight, got more popular. How did that shape both his public and private life?
I think in terms of his public life, I think he's become, since he was an early teenager, he was experiencing racism at his home club even, you know, and when he made his first appearance at a PGA Tour event, when he was aged just 16, in LA, he received a death threat then. And I think that's made him guarded as his life's gone on, especially when it comes to the media and dealing with them. He's never been one to give generously when it comes to time in the media. So I think he tends to keep himself to himself, I think, and that's always been the way, and ever since his teenage years, because he used to be very open to it, whether or not that was driven by his dad persuading him or telling him to appear in magazines, newspapers, TV shows, I don't know. But it certainly had an impact on his attitude towards dealing with the media and public perception, I think, going forward, yeah.
From how he was raised to the wild success that he had, he's also had to overcome a lot of physical pain as well, and amazingly return to golf. What lessons within all of that do you hope that people can walk away with after reading your book?
I think that Tiger's key asset is not so much his golf game, but it's his genuine star power. It's why people still want him back. It's why he's still the biggest draw in golf. You know, his body's ravaged by injuries, like you say, especially since the car crash a few years ago. And the fact that people still want him back, even though his body, to all intents and purposes, isn't up to it, is a sign that, you know, he was a player who was a GOAT. He was the GOAT. You know, in my opinion, he was the greatest player of all time. And if he comes back, amazing. Will he come back? I'm not so sure.
Gavin, because of his status as, you know, being considered one of the greatest of all time, is that one of the reasons why you wanted to look into Tiger's backstory or look into his childhood a little bit more? What inspired this?
Yeah, well, it's not because there aren't any books on Tiger Woods, that's for sure. I mean, there's been plenty of those over the years. I think maybe a couple of years ago, I was writing something else about Tiger, and I realised his 50th birthday was coming up at the end of last year, and also the 30th anniversary of him turning professional in August '96. So they were kind of nice hooks, really, to play around with. And going through some of the books that I've got on Tiger at home, I realised that while they touch on his childhood, his college career, his amateur career, there were none that were explicitly devoted to that. And I thought, well, let's have a look and let's see where we can go with this. And that's why the book ends when he turns professional in August '96. So it doesn't really, I mean, obviously it mentions it. You cannot not mention what happened after the scandal in 2009, but it kind of stops when he turns pro, and then we leave him there.
Where can people find your book?
Find it on Amazon, good bookshops, probably some bad ones too. So yeah.
Congratulations on this, Gavin. It sounds like a fascinating read. Thanks so much for your time this morning.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate that.
Of course.